On a tense evening filled with questions about law, order, and global stability, former US President Donald Trump delivered a sweeping series of remarks that blended domestic crime policies with the geopolitics of war and peace. His tone, alternating between sharp criticism and bold assertions, carried the weight of both local urgency and international consequence. What unfolded was a portrait of Trump's worldview, uncompromising on crime at home and determined to portray himself as a guardian against chaos abroad. Trump began by addressing an issue close to his political platform, the surge of violent crime involving young offenders. His words were stark, painting a picture of children who he said were indistinguishable from hardened adults in their capacity for violence. Trump said, "Arresting the people very strongly, arresting, and we're keeping them there because you know your laws here make it very difficult." Here, Trump was underscoring his frustration with what he views as weak legal frameworks that allow dangerous offenders, particularly juveniles, to escape serious consequences. He argued that criminal networks exploit these loopholes, using children as foot soldiers in crime. Trump continued, "One of the other laws we're trying to get done because you have 14-year-old kids that are just as tough as a 25-year-old kid, just as dangerous, and they carry the same gun." The former president emphasized that these youths, despite their age, possess the same lethal capacity as adults. He added, "And we have to make a provision where they're treated like older people because these are seriously tough bad. They're children, but they're criminals, and they're really bad criminals, and they're used by older people because they never get charged because you can't do anything to them." Trump's narrative painted an image of gang leaders manipulating minors precisely because the justice system shields them from full accountability. His solution? Alter the law to treat certain juvenile offenders as adults when the crimes are grave. Trump said, "But we are getting that change, Pam. I hope because you have 14-year-old kids that are evil. They're sick and they have to be put away. Something has to be done because you can't have a society where they're allowed to walk the street." The language was striking, almost deliberately provocative. By calling children evil and sick, Trump underscored his belief that age should not excuse accountability when the crimes are violent. This section of his remarks captured his broader political message. Crime is out of control, the system is too lenient, and reform is urgently needed. After speaking at length about domestic crime, Trump shifted gears. A question was posed to him about his earlier warnings to Russia's Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky regarding ceasefire talks. Would his threats of consequences still stand? Trump answered with his characteristic mix of ambiguity and boldness. Trump said, "I want to see that deal end. It's very, very serious what I have in mind if I have to do it, but I want to see it end." He acknowledged the complexity of negotiating with both leaders, hinting that scheduling and coordination itself posed a challenge. Trump added, "Sometimes he'll be there and Zelensky won't be there. You know, it's like, who do we have today? I got to get them both at the same time, but I want to have an end." Then, pivoting to his preferred tool of statecraft, Trump made clear that his approach would lean heavily on financial pressure rather than military escalation. Trump said, "We have economic sanctions. I'm talking about economic because we're not going to get into a world war." He framed his candidacy as a bulwark against catastrophe. Trump said, "I'll tell you what, in my opinion, if I didn't win this race, Ukraine could have ended up in a world war. We're not going to end up in a world war anymore, but it would have ended up possibly in a world war." This was classic Trump, presenting himself as the decisive factor preventing global chaos. He invoked not only his influence on Russia and Ukraine, but also his role in diffusing tensions elsewhere in the world. To support his point, Trump launched into an anecdote from his presidency, the fraught relationship between India and Pakistan. He described how he intervened when tensions risked spiraling into nuclear conflict. Trump said, "Just like India and Pakistan were going to end up in a nuclear war if I didn't stop them. You know, it was sort of strange. I saw they were fighting. Then I saw 7 jets were shot down. I said, that's not good. That's a lot of jets." According to Trump, the downing of multiple military aircraft alarmed him. He continued, "You know, $150 million planes were shot down, a lot of them, 7, maybe more than that. They didn't even report the real number." From his telling, Trump sprang into action, contacting both Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Pakistani officials. Trump said, "And I'm talking to a very terrific man, Modi of India, and I say, 'What's going on with you in Pakistan?' Then I'm talking to Pakistan on trade. I said, 'What's going on with you in India?'" He characterized the historical animosity as deeply entrenched, stretching back centuries. Trump said, "And the hatred was tremendous. Now, this has been going on for a hell of a long time, sometimes with different names for hundreds of years. But rather than appealing only to diplomacy, Trump described a hardball tactic, leveraging trade talks and tariffs as instruments of peace. Trump said, I said, what's going on? I said, I don't want to make a trade deal. No, we want to make trade deal. I said, no, I don't want to make a trade deal with you. You're going to have a nuclear war. You guys are going to end up in a nuclear war. The crux of his leverage was economic pain. Trump said that was very important to them. I said, call me back tomorrow, but we're not going to do any deals with you. Or we're going to put tariffs on you that are so high. His recollection of that moment was emphatic. Trump said, we're going to put tariffs on you that was so high, I don't give a damn. Your head's going to spin. You're not going to end up in a war. According to him, the result was swift. Trump said, within about 5 hours, it was done. It was done. Now, maybe it starts again. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'll stop it if it does. This narrative reinforced Trump's self-betrayal, a leader who used pressure and unpredictability to achieve peace where diplomacy alone might fail. Returning to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, Trump illustrated the devastating human toll. Trump said, the Russia-Ukraine situation last week, 7,012 soldiers, 7,002 soldiers died. They were Russian, they were Ukrainian, they weren't American. Here he acknowledged the indifference some Americans might feel, but insisted he cared deeply about the loss of life. Trump said, so a lot of people would say, what do you care? They're not American. I care. They're 12,000 over the last couple of weeks. Over 12,000 people died in 2 weeks. His point was not only about numbers, but about empathy. Trump invited his audience to imagine the personal scale of the tragedy. He said, we're talking about crime where somebody's killed here or somebody, think of it. You have your son leaving Russia, leaving Ukraine, their little house, wherever they live. The comparison was deliberate. While Americans often debate rising crime statistics in cities, the war overseas was claiming lives on a scale that dwarfed domestic losses. Trump's remarks spanned domestic justice reform and high-stakes diplomacy, unified by a single theme: his belief in the power of toughness, whether against teenage offenders in American cities or nuclear-armed rivals across the globe. On crime, his call to treat violent juveniles as adults reflects a push for harsher penalties, a stance likely to resonate with his political base but to raise concerns among human rights advocates. By framing young offenders as evil and sick, Trump was making a moral case for uncompromising justice. On foreign affairs, his reliance on economic sanctions and tariff threats highlighted his signature approach: transactional, pressure-driven, and rooted in the belief that financial leverage can deter wars. The India-Pakistan anecdote, whether fully accurate or embellished, fit neatly into that narrative, presenting Trump as the singular actor who prevented nuclear war. And on Ukraine, his grim focus on casualties illustrated both his desire to end the conflict and his insistence that his leadership was crucial to avoiding escalation into a global war. The portrait that emerged was one of stark contrasts: a leader promising to lock away 14-year-olds he deems irredeemable, while simultaneously claiming to have saved millions from nuclear catastrophe. For supporters, the message is strength and decisiveness. For critics, it is a troubling blend of harshness at home and unpredictability abroad. Yet one thing was unmistakable: Trump's words were designed to leave an imprint. Whether describing violent teens as really bad criminals or warning global rivals that tariffs would make their head spin, the former president was crafting a narrative of himself as the indispensable force against both lawlessness and war.